So friends, today we'll discuss about respiratory system. Respiratory system we'll discuss. So let's begin. So what are the cardinal symptoms of respiratory tract? The examiner can ask what are the cardinal symptoms you know. If there is respiratory tract involvement, then what will you say? So the cardinal symptoms, if there is a respiratory system involved, is cough with sputum production. Then you can have hemoptysis. Then you can have chest pain, pleuritic chest pain. Then you can have breathlessness. Then you can have wheezing or stridor. These are the audible sounds, wheezing or stridor. So what are the cardinal symptoms? Cough with expectoration, hemoptysis, chest pain, breathlessness, wheezing or stridor. Then besides these other symptoms, if there are present, these are hoarseness of the voice. There is hoarseness of the voice, then heaviness in the chest, then fever in cases of tuberculosis, lung abscess, pneumonia, pleurisy, you can have fever. Then there can be swelling of the feet if there is chronic or permanent secondary to the that is the heart gets fail, right heart failure because of the involvement of the lungs, or that is chronic or permanent, that can manifest as swelling of the feet as well. Then epistaxis, then you can have ENT, ear, nose and throat involvement, that can manifest as sinusitis, rhinitis, running nose, sneezing, ear infection, sore throat. Then painful swallowing can occur if there is septic tonsillitis. Then besides this, there is cough syncope. There is syncope, that is cough syncope can occur. Then you can have if there is a bronchogenic carcinoma. In bronchogenic carcinoma you can get hypertrophic osteoarthropathy, and rib pain if there is a bronchogenic carcinoma. Then snoring can occur, that indicates the obstructive sleep apnea. Then altered mentation can occur if there is a respiratory failure. Then we have to inquire symptoms related to the smoking. Then you should know the general symptoms of fever, decreased appetite, weight loss, fatigue, sleep, and blood disturbances. So, what are the cardinal symptoms of respiratory system involvement? So, you will say cough with sputum, hemoptysis, chest pain, breathlessness, wheezing, or stridor. These are the main cardinal symptoms, and you can add on other like hoarseness of voice, heaviness in the chest, fever, involvement of the ear, nose, throat, then cough syncope, and if there is bronchogenic carcinoma, you can have hypertrophic osteoarthropathy and the rib pain, and general symptoms like fatigue, weight loss, sleep disturbance, bowel and bladder involvement. Then what is examiner can ask what is upper respiratory tract? Then what will you say? Then you will say upper respiratory tract starts from the external nares and extend up to the junction of larynx with trachea. So what is upper respiratory tract? It extends from the external nares to the junction of larynx with trachea, and below the trachea there starts the lower respiratory tract. So what comes under lower respiratory tract? You should be knowing what comes under lower respiratory tract. In lower respiratory tract you have trachea, you have lobar bronchus, then segmental bronchus, then tracheobronchial tree, and lastly alveolar air sacs or spaces. So this is the lower respiratory tract. It includes the trachea, lobar bronchus, segmental bronchus, tracheobronchial tree, and alveolar air spaces. Then what is the scheme of examination? What is the scheme? How will you examine? You will examine first the upper respiratory tract, and then you will examine the lower respiratory tract. So let's take the upper respiratory tract. So first of all, you will see the nose. In the nose you will look for any congestion, any discharge, any crusting, any hypertrophic turbinate, then any bleeding spots, then any polyp. Then you will see the deviated nasal septum. Then you will see the nasal flare. nasal flare, that is alai nasai. So in the nose, what things you will look for? In the nose, you will see any congestion is there, any discharge, any crusting, any hypertrophic turbinate, any bleeding spots, any deviated nasal septum, any nasal flare due to nasal alai nasai. Then this was the nose. Then in the mouth, you will look for mouth breathing. Mouth breathing because of the adenites. In adenites hypertrophy, you get the mouth breathing. Then you will look for the pursed lip breathing. Pursed lip breathing in COPD. Pursed lip breathing in COPD. Then you will also see all these sinuses. All sinuses you will look. You will examine for the tenderness over the maxilla. You will examine for the tenderness over the maxilla. Ask the patient to sit and lean forward whether any heaviness on the forehead or over the frontal sinus is complained or not. So you will first examine all the sinuses, then you will look for the maxillary tenderness. Then you will ask the patient to sit and lean forward, and you will note whether any heaviness is noted over the forehead or over the frontal sinuses. You should note that. Then in the pharynx, you will look in pharynx. You will look any throat. You will see the throat. You will see the gums. You will see the tooth caries. Then you will see also the palate, posterior pharyngeal wall, posterior pharyngeal wall. You will look for any congestion there, and you will see the post nasal drip. Then you will also see the nasopharynx, tonsils with oral hygiene, and halitosis present or not. Halitosis present or not. You will see that. Then you will say larynx could not be examined. Larynx could only be examined by direct or indirect laryngoscopy. Larynx could not be examined. For examination of the larynx should require the direct and indirect laryngoscopy. So this is, I will repeat how we will examine the upper respiratory tract. In the nose, we will see any congestion, any discharges, any crusting, any deviated nasal septum. And in the mouth, you will look for the mouth breathing because of hypertrophic adenine and pursed lip breathing in COPD. Then all the sinuses you will check, especially the maxillary sinus tenderness. Then in the pharynx, you will see the throat, gum, tooth caries, and postnasal drip. Larynx, you cannot see, it requires direct and indirect laryngoscopy. And lastly, you should look for halitosis whether present or not. You know, halitosis you get in lung abscess and bronchiectasis. The motto of examination of the upper respiratory tract is to determine whether it is healthy or unhealthy, or favoring aspiration or not. Remember, nose is the gateway of the lungs. Nose is the gateway of the lungs. So why are you examining the upper respiratory tract? To look whether it is healthy or not, whether there is a risk of aspiration or not. Then this was the upper respiratory tract. Now proceed to the lower respiratory tract. The examination of lower respiratory tract. First of all, there are methods: inspection, then we have this palpation, then percussion, and lastly the auscultation. So this will you proceed: inspection, palpation, percussion, and auscultation. So what are the findings on inspection, you will say? So we'll take inspection. First of all, you will comment on the shape of the chest, then shape of the chest, then movement of the chest, then apical impulse. Stand on the right side of the patient and look tangentially over the precordium. You will stand on the right side and look tangentially over the precordium. So apical impulse you will see. You will look the shape, you will look the movement and apical impulse. Then you will see the respiration. How is the respiration? You will see the rate, rhythm, type of respiration. Then you will see depth and breathing pattern. Depth and breathing pattern. So in the respiration, what things you are going to see? You will going to see rate, rhythm, type, depth, and breathing pattern. So what is the rate of the respiration, what is the rhythm, what is the type of respiration, what is the depth of respiration, and what is the breathing pattern. Then after this shape, movement, apical impulse, and respiration type, then you will also see the venous prominence. Venous prominence is examined in standing or sitting position after cuffing. It is always either in sitting or standing, and on cuffing you will ask the patient to cuff and look for any venous prominence over the chest. Then you will also see whether there is fullness or depression, and whether this fullness is unilateral or bilateral. This fullness or depression is unilateral or bilateral, or whether it is localized or generalized. So we'll look for the fullness or depression, whether it is unilateral, bilateral, whether it is localized or generalized. Then you will also see the supraclavicular and infraclavicular fossa. Supraclavicular and infraclavicular fossa you will see. Then you will see whether both the nipples are at the same level or not, both nipples at same level or not, both nipples at same level or not. Then you will see whether accessory muscles of respiration are working or not. Accessory muscles is working or not, you will see that working or not. Then you will see whether wheezing or stridor is there or not. Wheezing or stridor is there or not. Then you will also look for intercostal suction. Then in the skin you will look from front and back. Then you will look for gynecomastia from bronchogenic carcinoma. Then pigmentation, any sinuses. You will look for pigmentation, any sinuses, and sinus can occur from empyema, cold abscess, or systemic fungal infection. So sinus you will see whether it is from empyema, cold abscess, or systemic fungal infection. Then you will also see any ulcer, any herpes zoster, any puncture mark, any swelling like cold abscess or metastatic nodule, like cold abscess or metastatic nodule. Then you will see the parietal edema. Parietal edema you will get in amoebic liver abscess, empyema thoracis, lymphedema. So where you get the parietal edema, you will get in amoebic liver abscess, empyema thoracis, and lymphedema. You will get the parietal edema in amoebic liver abscess, empyema thoracis, and lymphedema. Then you will see any shiny skin over the empyema thoracis, blue markings for radiotherapy over the sternum. These things you will see, all these things from the front and back. Then especially in the back, what things you will look for? In the back you will see any scoliosis, any kyphosis, any drooping of the shoulder, any winging of the scapula. Then you will look for the gibbous, position of the inferior angle of the scapula, and you will see the symmetry of the interscapular space. That is the spino-scapular distance. This is spino-scapular distance. Then you will see the ankylosing spondylitis. Then you will see the straight back, and any venous prominence. Also observe the skin condition, that is sinus over the back. Any deformity after thoracic operation like thoracoplasty should be carefully looked for. You will also look for the thoracoplasty. So what are the things you will observe in the back? In the back you will see any scoliosis, any kyphosis, any drooping of the shoulder, any winging of the scapula, any gibbous, then any oh, position of the inferior angle of the scapula, position of the inferior angle of both the scapula. This is very important. Position of the inferior angle of the scapula. Then you will see the symmetry of the interscapular areas, symmetry of the interscapular area, that is your spinoscapular distance. These are the spines. Yes, these are the spines. Spinoscapular distance. You will note it down. You will see the symmetry of the interscapular area, and you will note it down the spinoscapular distance from spine to the scapula. Then you will see any ankylosing spondylitis. Then straight back in ankylosing spondylitis. Then any venous prominence and any operation like thoracoplasty. This was about the inspection. Then we'll proceed towards the palpation, not palpitation, palpation of the chest. For palpation, you will first note the surface temperature. Then any tenderness, rib tenderness in trauma. You will see the tenderness, rib tenderness in trauma. Then fracture or secondary metastasis you will look for. Then costojunctional tenderness in Tietz syndrome, costochondral tenderness in Tietz syndrome. Then intercostal tenderness or punch tenderness in liver abscess or empyema thoracis. So punch tenderness or intercostal tenderness, you get it empyema thoracis and liver abscess. So you will see the surface temperature. You will look for the tenderness, whether in rib there is tenderness in the rib because of trauma, or there is fracture or secondary metastasis. Then costochondral junction tenderness in Tietz syndrome. Then punch tenderness in empyema thoracis and liver abscess. Then you will also see the corroborate your findings of infection. You will corroborate your findings of infection. You will gather it. Then you will see the examination, the chest asymmetry. You will examine the chest asymmetry, spinal deformity, then direction of the venous flow, then details of any swelling if present, and parietal edema. So you will examine the chest for asymmetry and spinal deformity, direction of the venous flow, details of the swelling, parietal edema, then position of the trachea and apex bead, and position of the mediastinum. So position of the trachea and the apex bead important. Then you will also see the movement of the chest. Always measure the expansion of the chest by a tape in full inspiration and in full expiration. So you will note down the movement of the chest in inspection. You will note down the movement, and you will also see, it is not inspection, sorry, it is in palpation. So you will note down the movement of the chest in palpation, and you will also in palpation try to find the vocal fermitus and any other palpatory findings like palpable friction fermitus, palpable ronchial fermitus, friction fermitus, ronchial fermitus, then palpable coarse crepitations, then subcutaneous emphysema, then any palpable pericardial rub. Some clinicians prefer to add cricosternal distance in palpation. So what are the findings on palpation? First, you look for the in palpation you will look for the temperature, surface temperature, any tenderness over the ribs, any fracture or metastatic tenderness, any costochondral tenderness as in Tietz syndrome, any punch tenderness as in liver abscess and empyema. Then you corroborate the findings of inspection also. In palpation you will say any chest asymmetry, you will palpate the chest asymmetry, you will see the spinal deformity, direction of the venous flow, and details of swelling if present, any tracheal or mediastinal shift you will see. Then you will see the movement of the chest. Then you will look for the vocal firmitus and any other palpatory findings like friction firmitus, bronchial firmitus, coarse crepitation, subcutaneous emphysema, and palpable pericardial rub. This was about the palpation. Then comes the part that is your percussion. Percussion of the chest. There are conventional percussion. You will compare and write in right and left side. There is conventional method, conventional percussion. Then you have the shifting dullness. Then you have the quine percussion. You will set in right and left side. Shifting dullness, right and left side. Conventional percussion, right and left side. Then hepatic and cardiac dullness, lost or not. Cardiac and hepatic dullness, lost or not. Lost or not. Both are lost in emphysema. Both are lost. The dullness is lost in emphysema. Then delineate the upper border of the hepatic dullness along the right midclavicular line. Cardiac dullness is not routinely done. So this was about the percussion. Then move on to your auscultation. So for auscultation, this you take the right and the left side. There are breath sounds. You will comment on the breath sounds. You will comment on the vocal resonance, right and left side, whether vocal resonance is decreased or increased. Then you will comment in the vocal resonance on whispering, pectoralici, egophony, bronchophony, whispering, pectoralici. Then you will also see any adventitious sound or added sound like ronchi, crepitations, any pleural rub. Then miscellaneous like scussion splash, in auscultation scussion splash. Then post-ship succussion you get in lung abscess and bronchogenic bronchiectasis. You will get this post-ship succussion, lung abscess, bronchiectasis. This is important. Then you can also look for auscultation in pneumothorax click, tinkling crepitations. So in auscultation, what are the miscellaneous sounds? These are succussion splash, post-tussive crepitations, pneumothorax click, tinkling crepitations. Never forget to examine the upper respiratory tract and the back in respiratory system. So you will never forget to examine the upper respiratory tract and back in the respiratory system. No examination of the lungs, however carefully performed, should be considered entirely satisfactory or final if made in the recombinant position. So you have to be examined in the sitting and standing position is necessary for while examining respiratory tract. Then see the sputum bowl and mention the abnormality in the patients with respiratory system also. So this is in brief what are the general things you are going to do in a case of respiratory tract. Now we'll take a specific case, that is your pleural effusion. So pleural effusion. So we'll take the pleural effusion. So the examiner is asked what is your diagnosis. Then you will say it is a case of left-sided massive pleural effusion, probably of tuberculous origin. So this is a case of left-sided massive pleural effusion, probably of tuberculous origin. So this is your diagnosis. Then the examiner asks why. Well, then what will you say? You will say this is a case of pleural effusion because of the signs and symptoms, and you will enumerate those symptoms and signs. So this is a case of pleural effusion, excessive fluid collected within the pleural cavity, that is pleural effusion, and it is because it is pleural effusion because it has the symptoms, and then you will narrate the history. You will say history. So we'll see there is evening rise of temperature from last 1 month. From last 1 month there is evening rise of temperature. Then there is dry cough, left sided chest pain. Dry cough with left sided chest pain. Dry cough with left sided chest pain from last 20 days. Then there is heaviness on the left side of the chest from last 15 days. Heaviness on left side from last 15 days. And there is respiratory distress from last 2 days. So this was the history of a case of pleural effusion. There should be fever from last 1 month, and there should be dry cough. Remember, this is dry cough, very very important. There is no productive cough in pleural effusion. There is dry cough, and with the left sided chest pain from 20 days, and from 15 days he is having this heaviness on the left side and respiratory distress from last 2 days. So chronological order is this. So these are the symptoms on taking the history. Then on signs, what are the signs of respiratory tract? You will say the signs on general survey, and then your specific signs you will say, that is your inspection, palpation, percussion, and auscultatory finding. So what are the general survey finding in a case of pleural effusion? So general survey, you will first of all tell the decubitus. You will tell the decubitus that the patient is lying on the left lateral decubitus. The patient is not comfortable in the bed. Patient is lying on the side of effusion, that is the left lateral decubitus position, and the respiratory rate is 26 breaths. Then you say the respiratory rate is 26 breaths per minute. It is abdominothoracic. It is abdominothoracic in type, and the rhythm is regular. There is less movement on the left side of the chest. Accessory muscles of the respiration are working. So how will you see the respiration is 26 breaths per minute, abdominothoracic in type, and rhythm is regular, and there is less movement on the left side of the chest. Accessory muscles are being used. Then this was about the rest. Then lymph nodes not palpable, rarely few meter, non-tender or slightly tender cervical lymph nodes may be palpable in tuberculosis. Lymph nodes are usually not palpable. If it is palpable, it is usually few, and these are matted, and these are non-tender. Slightly tender cervical lymph nodes may be palpable. Slight tenderness, or they usually non-tender if it is tuberculous. Then there is anemia, mild anemia is there. Then pulse, you will elaborate the pulse. Then temperature is this much, you will say about pulse, temperature. Then emaciation. Then nicotine staining of the fingers. Then it points towards the pleural effusion developing from the bronchogenic carcinoma. Nicotine staining is absent, you will say in your case. Then this was about your general survey. Then you will proceed to the inspection. So what are the inspectory findings in a case of pleural effusion? Then you will examine the upper respiratory tract. Upper respiratory tract is within normal limit. Then there is increased respiratory rate of 26 breaths per minute. Respiratory rate is increased on inspection. There is fullness of the intercostal space on the left side of the chest. There is fullness on the left side of the chest. Diminished movement of the chest on the left side. There is fullness, and there is decreased movement on left side. Then apical impulse could not be visualized. Apical impulse not visualized. Absence of intercostal suction. There is absence of intercostal suction. Then these things you have to tell. Then comes to the palpation. So I repeat again, what are the inspectory findings? Upper respiratory within normal limit. Respiratory rate is increased. There is fullness and decreased movement on the left side. Apical impulse not visualized. Absence of intercostal suction is there. Then in palpation, what will you say? In palpation, there is decreased movement on the left side. In palpation, decreased movement on the left side, and expansion is 1.5 inch as measured by the tape. And expansion is 1.5 inch as measured by the tape. Then trachea is shifted to the right side, and apex beat could not be localized. Trachea on the right side and apex beat you could not localized. or impalpable. If apex beat can be localized in a left-sided pleural effusion, it will situated somewhere near the sternum or towards the right side. Usually apex beat you cannot localize. If you are localized, it will be somewhere near the sternum. Apex beat will be shifted towards the right side if you are able to localized. Otherwise, it will won't be localized. Then you will say about this vocal fermitus is reduced on right side. Vocal fermitus is reduced on right side. Then absence of tenderness, you have to tell whether present or not. Vocal fermitus. Then friction fermitus absent. Friction fermitus absent. Then normal palpatory findings on the right side. Again you have to tell this also. Normal palpatory findings on the right side. On right side. Then this is about the palpation. Then proceed towards the percussion. So we'll proceed towards the percussion of a case of pleural effusion. Stony dullness on whole of the left side of the chest, which does not alter with change of posture, that is shifting dullness is absent. You will say stony dullness is present which does not change with posture. Stony dullness is present on the left side which does not change with the posture. This line is important, write it down. Stony dullness is present which does not change with posture. If it is hydropneumothorax, it will change with posture. So so there is stony dullness present on the left side of the chest which does not change with posture, that is there is no shifting dullness. Then trope space is dull on percussion. Trope space is dull. If you are getting, trope space is dull on percussion. Then tenderness is absent while percussing the chest. Normal resonant node is seen on the right side of the chest. So this was our percussion. Then move on to the auscultation. Then auscultation, there will be diminished vesicular breath sound on the left side or absent breath sound. Absent or decreased breath sound. Absent or decreased breath sound on left side. In auscultation, normal vesicular breath sound is seen on the right side. Then vocal resonance, you will say this was about the breath sound. Then vocal resonance diminished on left side and normal resonance is seen on the right side. Then adventition sound, that is crepitations. Adventition sound, that is crepitations. Rhonchi, pleural rub is absent in both right and left side of the chest. So absent adventition sound. Sometimes there may be tubular breath sounds, bronchophony as whispering pectoralogy with increased vocal fermitus and egophony present on the upper border of moderate pleural effusion. Sometimes you may get tubular breath sound, bronchophony, whispering pectoralogy with increased vocal fermitus and egophony at upper border of moderate pleural effusion. So sometimes you can get the tubular breath sounds, bronchophony, whispering pectoralogy, vocal fermitus increased, egophony at the upper border of moderate pleural effusion. Then vocal fermitus, percussion and auscultation are carried out in the following way. Vocal fermitus, percussion and auscultation are carried out in the following way. So vocal percussion and auscultation are carried out in the following ways. First, anterior chest, then lateral chest and the back. You will do the percussion and auscultation in the anteriorly, then laterally, then back. Anterior, lateral and back. Anterior, lateral and back. So what are the anterior chest? You will along the mid clavicular line, supraclavicular apex, infraclavicular mammary and inframammary areas along the midclavicular line. Remember, apex is precursed from back. Apex is precursed from back. Apex is precursed from back. Then what are the areas? We have the supraclavicular, infraclavicular, mammary areas anteriorly. Supraclavicular, infraclavicular, mammary areas along the mid-clavicular line. Remember, apex is precursed from the back. So this was anteriorly. Then lateral chest along the mid-axillary line. You will examine the axillary and precurse the axillary and infra-axillary area. Then in the upper back, you will in the upper part there will be suprascapular, middle part there will be interscapular, and in the lowermost part there will be infrascapular, suprascapular, interscapular, infrascapular. According to few clinicians, slow shifting dullness may be present in pleural effusion, though it is difficult to demonstrate. Slow shifting dullness you may get in pleural effusion, slow shifting dullness, but it is difficult to demonstrate. Okay, then stony dullness of right-sided pleural effusion is continuous with the liver dullness, while in left-sided pleural effusion the dullness is continuous with the cardiac dullness with the loss of trough space tympanicity. So if it is right side, then the stony dullness which will merge with the liver dullness and if it is right side it will merge with the cardiac dullness with the loss of trough space tympanicity will be lost. A small pleural effusion on the right or the left side may be demonstrated only by tidal percussion. Tidal percussion, if there is very small pleural effusion on right or left side, very small pleural effusion is there, then it will be demonstrated by tidal percussion. So they may ask you to do the tidal percussion. So this was the brief your symptoms and signs. Then what is your case? The examiner can ask what is your case. Then you have to build up the summary from the symptoms and sign and try to say systematically as described above. Then what is your case? You have to actually summarize the history and examination point. You have to summarize. So what is your case? You will summarize. Then the examiner can ask why not pneumothorax. This is a case I am thinking it to be pneumothorax. Why not pneumothorax? Then what will you say? You will say the presence of stony dullness. The presence of stony dullness rules out percussion. Rules out pneumothorax. Pneumothorax is tympanic or resonant on percussion, and this establishes the diagnosis of pleural effusion. So we'll say the dullness is important. So why not pneumothorax? You will say there is stony dullness. While in pneumothorax we get the tympanic or resonant dullness on resonant node on percussion. So the examiner can ask, okay, then it is not pneumothorax. I agree. Then why not hydropneumothorax? The examiner can ask like this, why not hydropneumothorax? Then you will say there is absence of shifting dullness, there is no cushion splash, and there is classical horizontal fluid level. There is classical horizontal fluid level in hydropneumothorax. So why not hydropneumothorax? You will say there is no shifting dullness, there is no cushion splash, and classical horizontal fluid level is absent. Then important points in general examination of respiratory system. What are the important points? First are the decubitus propped up in orthoapnea, decubitus. Then nutrition, emaciation is seen in bronchogenic carcinoma and in TB and bronchogenic carcinoma you will see the emaciation, and in diabetes and AIDS. Diabetes and AIDS are often associated with pulmonary TB, pulmonary tuberculosis. Then faces, moon face. Then you will also see the faces, moon face because of the superior vena cava syndrome. You get the moon face due to superior vena cava syndrome or sarcoidosis. In sarcoidosis, you get the lupus perineo in sarcoidosis, and in superior vena cava syndrome, you get the moon face. Then anemia because of tuberculosis, bronchogenic carcinoma, massive hemoptysis. Then you can get jaundice if the bronchogenic carcinoma metastasizes to the liver. Then ATT induced hepatitis, bronchogenic carcinoma metastasis can cause jaundice. Then disseminated COX and pulmonary thromboembolism, these can be precipitating factors. Disseminated tuberculosis and pulmonary thromboembolism can cause jaundice. Then in the general survey, you will look for any cyanosis. Cyanosis as in acute severe asthma, tension pneumothorax, lobar pneumonia, cyanosis you will get. Then clubbing you will see in bronchogenic carcinoma, bronchiectasis, lung abscess, empyema thoracis. So bronchiectasis, lung abscess, empyema thoracis, you will get the clubbing. Then pulsus paradox you will see in a case of acute severe asthma, pulsus paradox in acute asthma. Then lymph nodes you will palpate the supraclavicular lymph nodes, tuberculons, Scaleni's nodes in bronchogenic carcinoma. Then Virchow's gland in bronchogenic carcinoma and glands in the posterior triangle of the neck. So lymph nodes are also examined. If it is you are suspecting bronchogenic carcinoma, you should know where is Virchow's gland. Virchow's gland in bronchogenic carcinoma. Then supraclavicular glands, Scaleni's nodes for bronchogenic carcinoma. Virchow's gland, Scaleni's node. What are these? You should know it. Virchow's gland, Scaleni's node. These both in bronchogenic carcinoma. Then respiration, you will see whether the patient is tachyapneic, hyperapneic, bradyapneic, tachyapneic, orthoapneic, bradyapneic, hyperapneic. These things too you should know. Then temperature, you will see for any infective etiology like tuberculosis, lung abscess, pneumonia. So temperature you will look for TB, lung abscess, pneumonia. Then edema from chronic or pulmonale, Then in the eye, what things you are going to look for? In the eye, you are going to see Horner syndrome from bronchogenic carcinoma, Horner syndrome from bronchogenic carcinoma. Then subconjunctival hemorrhage because of chronic cough and superior vena cava syndrome. Subconjunctival hemorrhhage from chronic cough and subconjunctival hemorrhage from superior vena cava syndrome. Then chemosis of the conjunctiva in superior vena cava syndrome. Chemosis of the conjunctiva. Chemosis you will look for. You will in the eyes you have seen the Horner syndrome, then subconjunctival hemorrhage, then chemosis. Then polycythemia, if it is a case of COPD, you will see in the eyes polycythemia. Then lenticular conjunctivitis in primary tuberculosis for lenticular conjunctivitis in a case of TB, polycythemia in COPD. Then chronic choroid tubercle in retina and miliary tuberculosis in the retina, you will see the tubercles in TB in the retina. You will look. Color blindness indicates the ethambutol toxicity. Then papilledema you will get in COPD and SVC. Papilledema in COPD and superior vena cava syndrome, you will get the papilledema and chronic obstructive pulmonary disease and superior vena cava syndrome. And any obvious deformity. This was about the eyes. Now we'll move on to what I will repeat. What are the eye findings in respiratory tract? There may be you can get, what was this? This was Horner syndrome because of the bronchogenic carcinoma. This was subconjunctival hemorrhage, chemosis, polycythemia, lenticular conjunctivitis, retinal tubercle, papilledema. So Horner syndrome, subconjunctival hemorrhage, chemosis, polycythemia, lenticular conjunctivitis, keratoconjunctivitis, retinal tubercle, papilledema. These are the eye findings in respiratory tract. Then in the hands of a case of respiratory system, what are the things you will look for? You will look for nicotinic staining, you will look the clubbing, then you will see the cyanosis, then wasting of the small muscles of the hand, as in thoracic inlet syndrome. There will be wasting of small muscles of hand. Then warm and moist hand in type 2 respiratory failure. Type 2 respiratory failure, there will be warm and moist hand. Type 2 respiratory failure, warm and moist hand. Then flapping tremors in the hand. So we'll repeat the findings. In the hand, there will be nicotinic staining, clubbing, cyanosis. If there is thoracic inlet syndrome, there will be wasting of the small muscles of the hand. Then in type 2 respiratory failure, there will be warm and moist hand and flapping tremors. So nicotine staining, clubbing, cyanosis, wasting, warm and moist hand, flapping tremors, these all things you will look. Then what are the skin findings in a case of respiratory system? So you will look for the erythema nodosum, occurs in tuberculosis, erythema nodosum. Then scars are sinuses in the neck. Then scrofloderma in tuberculosis. Then blue radiotherapy mark with Indian ink over the chest for the treatment of SVC syndrome. In SVC syndrome, you can get blue radiotherapy mark with Indian ink over the chest for the treatment of SVC syndrome. There you can get the blue radiotherapy mark. Then you will see any obvious deformity in the back. You will see gibbous, you will see the kyphoscoliosis, then you will see the any deformed chest deformities, any different chest deformities, you will comment on that. Then this was the general survey. Then what is pleural effusion? The examiner can ask, what is pleural effusion? Then you will say it is the collection of serous fluid within the pleural cavity, that is between the visceral and parietal pleura, is pleural effusion. Only when the character of the fluid is transudate, it is known as hydrothorax. So what is pleural effusion? You will say the collection of serous fluid within the pleural cavity. So it is collection of serous fluid within the pleural cavity. It is pleural effusion. Only when it is transudate collection in the fluid, it is hydrothorax. Actually, the collection of fluid which is resulting from the increased hydrostatic pressure or decreased oncotic pressure occurring within the normal pleura is the ultrafiltration of the plasma. Transudate is in hydrothorax. It is usually bilateral. So if there is an increased hydrostatic pressure and decreased oncotic pressure with the normal pleura, and this is ultrafiltrate of plasma, that is transudate in hydrothorax. Hydrothorax is usually bilateral. When the effusion occurs due to pleural disease, more nearly resemble plasma, that is the exudate. If it is ultrafiltrate of plasma, it is your transudate. And if it is because of effusion due to the diseases of the pleura, then this resembles the plasma. It is not the ultrafiltrate, it resembles the plasma, then it is exudate, which results from the increased capillary permeability. Exudate results from increased capillary permeability. and is commonly unilateral, and this is pleural effusion, and it is usually unilateral and is commonly unilateral but may be bilateral as well. Then many types of pleural effusion like transudative, exudative. Transudative is serous, exudative is straw-colored, empyema is purulent, then hemorrhagic and chylous. So what are the types of effusion you know? So it could be serous as in transudative, it could be straw-colored as in exudative, then it could be purulent as in empyema, or it could be hemorrhagic, it could be chylous. So serous if it is transudative, straw colored if it is exudative, purulent if it is empyema, hemorrhagic and chylous effusions are there. Then now we'll discuss what are the causes of pleural effusion. So the causes of pleural effusion are divided into exudative and transudative. Exudative and transudative pleural effusion. So exudative and transudative pleural effusion. Exudative, we have the pneumonia, possibly the commonest cause is worldwide is pneumonia, tuberculosis, bronchogenic carcinoma. So remember these three: exudative, pneumonia, tuberculosis, bronchogenic carcinoma. Pneumonia, tuberculosis, bronchogenic carcinoma. Pneumonia, tuberculosis and bronchogenic carcinoma. Then in transudative, remember congestive cardiac failure, nephrotic syndrome, cirrhosis of the liver. Cirrhosis of the liver. So congestive cardiac failure, nephrotic syndrome and cirrhosis of the liver. So these are the causes of exudative and transudative pleural effusion. Pneumonia, tuberculosis, bronchogenic carcinoma are the exudative causes. In transudative causes, we have the congestive cardiac failure, nephrotic syndrome and cirrhosis of the liver. If you want to add or in exudative pleural effusion, you can add so many causes like in exudation you can get in pulmonary infarction, then collagen vascular disease like SLE, rheumatoid arthritis, you can get exudation. Then in pleural mesothelioma, you can get exudation. Lymphomas, leukemias, Meek syndrome, pancreatitis, asbestosis, yellow nail syndrome, rare. It is due to effusion due to the lymphedema. Then chylous pleural effusion is also exudative and drug-induced, and familial Mediterranean fever. So in exudation list, you can add this: the pulmonary infarction, collagen vascular disease, pleural mesothelioma, lymphoma, leukemia. These things you can add: collagen vascular disease, lymphoma, leukemia, mesothelioma, pulmonary infarction, asbestos related chylous effusions are these. Then in transudative you can add hypoproteinemia, severe anemia, constructive pericarditis, pericardial effusions, mixed edema. You can add on these things. So main you remember this: if it is asking exudative cause, and you should be able to answer pneumonia, tuberculosis and bronchogenic carcinoma. If it is asking transudative, then you should be able to answer congestive cardiac failure, nephrotic syndrome, cirrhosis of the liver. Then in transudative you can also add the superior vena cava syndrome and peritoneal dialysis. Then how to diagnose the hydrothorax? How will you diagnose hydrothorax? The examiner can ask question, how do you diagnose hydrothorax? Then you will say in hydrothorax it is usually a bilateral disease. Effusion is usually bilateral, and there may be presence of anasarca. Anasarca may be present. Then evidence of congestive cardiac failure, cirrhosis of the liver, nephrotic syndrome or severe anemia with malnutrition will be there. Then you will look for the evidence of congestive cardiac failure, evidence of nephrotic syndrome and evidence of cirrhosis of the liver. Cirrhosis of the liver you will see, and severe anemia. These features you will add on. Then also diagnose can be made because of, as you aspirate you can see the serous colored serous fluid, transudative nature of the pleural fluid on aspiration. Then absence of signs of inflammation. Absence of signs on inflammation, there is no history of fever, no local tenderness that points toward the hydrothorax. Then there will be absence of sign of inflammation. No fever, no local tenderness that indicates your hydrothorax. So how do you diagnose hydrothorax? Hydrothorax is usually bilateral and there may be anasarca, there may be features of congestive cardiac failure, nephrotic syndrome, chronic liver disease, chronic cirrhosis, anemia. Then on aspiration, proving that it is transitory in nature. Then absence of the signs of inflammation, there is no fever, no local tenderness, that is favoring that it is a case of hydrothorax. In patients with hydrothorax, always look for the collection of fluid in other serous cavities. So one should be careful in detecting edema, pericardial effusion, ascites, hydrocele. These things will be there. There will be collection in. This is very very important. I will write it down. So examiner can ask, I am thinking that it is why you are thinking it is hydrothorax. Then you will say there is collection of fluid in other cavities, and you can say that I am not thinking hydrothorax because I could not find any collections in the other cavities, so I am not thinking in that way. So the collection of fluid in other serous cavities like pericardial cavities, like hydrocele, ascites will be there for calling it to be a hydrothorax. So this is important. Then the examiner can ask one more question: what are the causes of hemorrhagic pleural effusion? This is very important. So this is very important. Then you will say it could be neoplasm, primary or secondary, pleural mesothelioma. So first is cancer, neoplasm, which could be pleural mesothelioma, primary or secondary neoplasms. Then chest trauma. Then chest trauma is another cause during paracentesis or placement of the central line or post thoracic surgery. Then this is trauma. Then you have the tuberculosis effusion is also hemorrhagic, and bleeding diathesis, and lymphoma, leukemia, and use of anticoagulation therapy. So these are the causes of hemorrhagic effusion: neoplasms, trauma, tuberculosis, bleeding diathesis, lymphoma, leukemias, and anticoagulant therapy. So this is very very important. So neoplasms, chest trauma, tuberculosis, bleeding diathesis, lymphoma, leukemia, and anticoagulant therapy can cause your hemorrhagic effusion. Besides these, pulmonary infarction, acute hemorrhagic pancreatitis, asbestos-related pleural effusion is hemorrhagic. Pleural infarction, acute hemorrhagic pancreatitis, asbestos-related pleural effusion is hemorrhagic. Then pleural effusion resulting from mesothelioma usually does not shift the mediastinum as mesothelioma encases the lung on the infected side and is commonly related to asbestosis. So this line you can take it: mesothelioma does not shift the mediastinum as it encases the lung on the affected side and is commonly related to asbestosis. Then comes the question: pleural effusion resulting from I told you in hemothorax, pleural effusion hematocrit is greater than 50% of the peripheral blood. Hematocrit is greater than 50% of the peripheral blood. So what happens in hemothorax? The pleural fluid hematocrit will be more than the 50% of peripheral blood hematocrit. So if the peripheral blood hematocrit is 50, then the pleural fluid hematocrit will be more than 25, more than 50%. So pleural fluid hematocrit will be more than 25. So pleural fluid hematocrit will be more than the 50% of the peripheral blood hematocrit. It is the fluid. If the fluid is kept on standing in a test tube, clot formation is complete in traumatic aspiration, while the clot is incomplete in hemothorax. So clot formation is complete If clot formation is complete on standing, then it is trauma, and if clot formation is incomplete on standing, then it is hemothorax. Hemothorax. Then examiner can ask question, what are the causes of chylous or milky effusions? Chylous or milky pleural effusion, milky pleural effusion, what are the causes? Then what will you say? The chylous or the milky effusion is usually result from the leakage of chyle, that is the thoracic duct lymph, into the pleural space. So it is the leakage of lymph into the pleural space. So chylous effusion, what are the causes? And is usually due to, so I am writing the causes, is usually due to trauma, thoracic surgery, that is trauma, tuberculosis, malignancies, lymphoma, filariasis, myxedema, congenital absence of the thoracic duct, then yellow nail syndrome. So what are the causes of chylous effusion? It could be trauma, tuberculosis, malignancies, lymphomas, filariasis, trauma, tuberculosis, malignancies. You can remember like this also. You can, if you want to. M-T-SCURE, 2 times M, 2 times T. What are the 2 times M? Myxedema, malignancy. 2 times T, tuberculosis, trauma. But you never forget this filariasis. Filariasis can cause your chylous effusion. So this was the causes of chylous effusion. Then what are the causes of bilateral pleural effusion? The causes of bilateral effusions. Remember hydrothorax is usually bilateral. Hydrothorax is usually bilateral, but we are talking about bilateral pleural effusion. Bilateral pleural effusion is rheumatoid arthritis. Then rheumatoid arthritis can cause bilateral effusion. Then SLE can cause. Then lymphoma, leukemias. Then bilateral tuberculosis effusion. Then pulmonary infarction and multiple pleural metastasis. So bilateral effusions you get in rheumatoid arthritis, systemic lupus erythematosus, lymphoma, leukemia, bilateral tuberculosis effusion, pulmonary infarction, multiple pleural metastasis. I repeat, rheumatoid, SLE, lymphoma, leukemia, bilateral TB, pulmonary infarction, and multiple pleural metastasis. Remember, hydrothorax is usually bilateral. Then what are the causes of predominant right-sided effusion and predominant left-sided effusion? So predominant right-sided effusion you will get in ruptured ischemic liver abscess, into the pleural cavity, cirrhosis of the liver, congestive cardiac failure, Meek syndrome, right-sided subdiaphragmatic abscess. So what are the causes of right-sided effusion? It is liver abscess rupturing into the cavity. It could be the cirrhosis of the liver, congestive cardiac failure, Meek syndrome, subphrenic abscesses. And in the left side, it could be due to acute pancreatitis, esophageal rupture as in Boharve syndrome, ruptured esophagus, then Dressler syndrome. It is post-myocardial infarction syndrome with fever and chest pain. Then subdiaphragmatic abscess, left-sided, and aortic dissection. So we'll repeat. On the right side, it could be liver abscess rupturing, cirrhosis liver, CCF, then Meek syndrome, then subdiaphragmatic right side abscess. In left side, acute pancreatitis, esophageal rupture, Dressler syndrome, then aortic dissection, and left-sided subdiaphragmatic abscess. Then the examiner can ask, what are the causes of recurrent pleural effusion? What are the causes of recurrent pleural effusion. Now the causes of recurrent pleural effusion, you will say, first is cancers, bronchogenic carcinoma. Bronchogenic carcinoma can cause recurrent effusion, and pulmonary TB can cause recurrent effusions, congestive cardiac failure, collagen vascular disease, pleural mesothelioma, lymphoma. So the recurrent effusions could be due to the bronchogenic carcinoma, tuberculosis, congestive cardiac failure, collagen vascular disease, pleural mesothelioma, lymphoma. So these two are malignancy, bronchogenic carcinoma and pleural mesothelioma. Then tuberculosis, congestive cardiac failure, collagen vascular diseases, and lymphoma can cause recurrent effusion. Then what are the drug-induced pleural disease and pleural effusion? Pleural fluid is usually eosinophilic if there is drug-induced effusions. The drug-induced effusions are, we have this nitrofurantoin, then methysergide, amiodarone can cause pleural effusion, then bromocriptine, dantrolene sodium, procarbazine. So if drug induced is asking nitrofurantoin, amiodarone, methysergide, bromocriptine, dantrolene sodium, procarbazine, remember it. Never forget to at least remember this. Amiodarone and nitrofurantoin. Remember this. Then what are the causes of empyema thoracis? Causes of empyema thoracis. So causes of empyema thoracis is basically the collection of pus in the pleural cavity is the empyema thoracis, and the causes are rupture of the tuberculous cavity or post pneumonic rupture into the pleural effusion. So the rupture of the tuberculous cavity rupture into the pleural cavity, that can cause empyema thoracis. And then secondary infection of the hemothorax or pleural effusion, then rupture of the subphrenic abscess or perforation of the esophagus, subphrenic abscess rupture or perforation of the esophagus can cause empyema thoracis. Then rupture of the lung abscess, especially Staph aureus, which is thin walled and multiple, can rupture, and lung abscess can rupture. Lung abscess, bronchiectasis, they can rupture. Then septicemia, pyoemia, then trauma from penetrating wounds of the chest after chest aspiration or liver biopsy. That is, trauma can cause empyema thoracis. So what are the causes of empyema thoracis? First, the cavities get ruptured, tuberculous cavities. Then lung abscess, bronchitis can rupture. Then subphrenic abscesses can rupture. Then secondary infection of the pleurothorax or pleural effusion or hemothorax. So these are the causes of empyema thoracis. Then how will you do the bedside diagnosis of empyema thoracis? That is, purulent effusion is there. How will you do the bedside diagnosis? First, patient will be toxic. In empyema thoracis, patient will be toxic and prostrated, and there will be loss of weight. Then there will be hectic rise of temperature with rigors and sweating. There is hectic temperature will be there. This is important. Patient will be toxic, prostrated, hectic temperature will be there. Then tachycardia as well as tachyapnea. You will get tachycardia and tachyapnea. Then there will be development of clubbing will be there in empyema thoracis. Then intercostal tenderness. Patient winces with pain as well as fullness. So intercostal tenderness and fullness you will get. Then skin is red, edematous and glossy over the empyema. The skin will be red, edematous and glossy over the empyema. Then plus you will find the signs of pleural effusion. Then rarely a swelling of the chest wall is seen, which gives impulse on coughing. The swelling which gives impulse on coughing, that is called as your emphysema necessitans. That is the pulse collected under the skin of the chest wall due to rupture of the purulent material from the pleural cavity which communicates with the empyema thoracis. So basically the pus is rupturing into the skin of the chest wall, that is empyema nascitans. So what are the bedside diagnoses of empyema? Patient will be toxic, prostrated, hectic rise of temperature with rigor, sweating. There will be tachycardia, tachypnea, clubbing will be there, intercostal tenderness will be there, where there will be fullness of the chest, skin will be red, edematous and glossy. There will be signs of pleural effusion, and swelling may show impulse on coughing, that is empyema nascitans. Then the examiner can ask, what is stony dullness? What is stony dullness? Then you will say the dull note elicited by the percussion plus there is a first I am getting the dull note plus you are getting the feeling of increased resistance on the percussion finger. On the percussing finger you are getting the you are getting the dull note and you are getting more resistance on the percussing finger. That is what is stony dullness. Then bronchial breath sounds above the fluid level in pleural effusion. What is the mechanism for bronchial breath sound at the level of pleural effusion? So what will you say? It is said that air conducting through the relaxed or collapsed lung produces the tubular breath sound. So there is a bronchial breath sound, bronchophony, whispering pectoralici. The air conducted through the relaxed or the collapsed lung, the air conducted through the relaxed or collapsed lung produces the tubular breath sound. So basically the air is being conducted through the relaxed or compressed lung, produces the tubular breath sound. So there is bronchial breath sound, bronchophony and whispering pectoralici. Pleural effusion produces compression, collapse, and conductivity of the sound through the collapsed lung is increased if the bronchus remains patent. So why we are getting, because this is causing the collapse of the lung, and if the bronchus is patent, as the air passes through the collapsed lung, the conductivity of the sound is increased if the bronchus remain patent, and that's why we are getting the bronchial breath sounds. So you will say it is said that air conducted to the collapsed lung produces tubular sound. Pleural effusion produces the compression, collapse, and conductivity of the sound through the collapsed lung is increased if the bronchus remains patent. So this is the mechanism behind the bronchial breath sound in collapsed lung. Clinical findings at the upper border of moderate pleural effusion. So what are the clinical findings at pleural effusion upper border? So what are the clinical findings? This is very important. So actually there is a horizontal upper border of the fluid. Alice accept curved, so-called classical finding of pleural effusion. Highest level of dullness is in the axilla in comparison to the anterior and the posterior wall, and thus assuming the shape of a letter S is not demonstrated clinically. It is said that the upper border of the fluid level swipes towards the axilla due to capillary suction, and the highest point of the fluid is in axilla is just a radiological observation. So the clinical finding will be there is horizontal upper border will be there. Alice Abscess curve, you cannot determine it clinically, it is a radiological observation. The first is you will get the horizontal upper border of the fluid, then saccadic resonance. After Joseph-Socard, on percussion you will get the saccadic resonance. It is observed that just above the upper border of the moderate effusion and the note hyperresonance mimics the percussion over the empty wooden box, that boxy note. It is due to compensatory emphysema. So at the upper border of the effusion you get the saccadic resonance. This is another finding. Saccadic resonance is just as if you are percussing on the empty wooden box. Percussion on the empty wooden box, empty wooden box, boxy note, boxy note. It is just above the upper part of the pleural effusion. The note is hyperresonant. Hyperresonant node you will get on the upper border. So first you get the horizontal fluid level. You get the horizontal fluid level in upper border, and then you will get the resonant node. Hyperresonant nodes. That as if you are percussing an empty wooden box. That is the boxy note. Then bronchial breath sounds. Bronchial breath sounds you will get maybe audible, pleural rub rarely, and egophony. Bronchial breath sound, egophony, and rarely pleural rub you can get at the upper border. Bronchophony, egophony, whispering pectorology, all this finding at the upper border, and there is a horizontal upper border of the fluid, so cardiac resonance will be there. What keeps the trachea in midline? Examiner can ask what keeps the trachea in midline. You will say negative intrapleural pressure on both sides. Negative intrapleural pressure on both sides keeps the trachea in midline. Then the examiner can ask one more question. Is it possible to have trachea shifted towards the side of effusion? Normally effusion causes tracheal shift to the opposite side. This is trachea. If there is effusion, trachea will shift to the opposite side. So what are the conditions in which trachea will shift to the same side? The examiner is asking this question. Then what will you say? Then you will say it is possible in case of pleural effusion, that is malignant developing from the ipsilateral bronchogenic carcinoma. If we go through the basic pathology, it is very easy to understand. It is possible in case of a pleural effusion developing from the ipsilateral bronch. You will say it is possible, yes, if effusion is because of effusion due to bronchogenic carcinoma. Ipsilateral, if there is ipsilateral bronchogenic carcinoma, effusion due to ipsilateral bronchogenic carcinoma is there. So it can cause what? It can cause what is absorption collapse? It can cause absorption collapse, that is endobronchial growth. Bronchogenic carcinoma foreign body infarction will be there. It can cause absorption collapse. If there is bronchogenic carcinoma, foreign body aspiration or impaction will be there. It can cause absorption collapse, that is the air gets absorbed within the bronchi and there is collapse of the lung. So bronchus gets obstructed, intrapleural pressure remains negative, trachea shifted to the same side. It is more negative intrapleural pressure which draws the trachea to the same side. So in absorption collapse, what happens? The bronchus will not remain patent, and there is intrapleural pressure, negative intrapleural pressure becomes negative, and trachea is shifted to the same side. It is more negative intrapleural pressure which draws the trachea towards the same side. So yes, it is possible to have effusion and there is a same sided division if there is a bronchogenic growth or if there is a foreign body infection that causes the absorption collapse of the lung, and there is a bronchus if not patent, then more internegative pleural pressure will be created and the trachea will shift to the same side. And in compression collapse due to pleural effusion, pneumothorax or hydropneumothorax, bronchus remains patent, intrapleural pressure remains positive, and trachea will shift to the opposite side due to positive intrapleural pressure. But if there is absorption collapse, it will be same side. But if there is compression collapse, then what happens? In compression collapse, the negative there will be positive, in compression collapse there will be positive intrapleural pressure, and that is because of pleural effusion and hydropneumothorax or pneumothorax, and the bronchus is patent, intrapleural pressure is positive, bronchus is patent, and trachea is pushed to the opposite side due to the positive intrapleural pressure. So in compression collapse it is opposite, in opposite side trachea will go to the opposite side in compression collapse, but it is absorption collapse, trachea will shift to the same side. Now if we deal with the case of bronchogenic carcinoma with malignant pleural effusion, the tussle between absorption and compression will determine the position of the trachea. So if we are dealing bronchogenic carcinoma with malignant effusion, the tussle between compression and absorption collapse will determine the position of the trachea. Compression collapse plays more role, then trachea will go to the opposite side, and if absorption collapse plays more role, then trachea will shift to the same side. And if they are playing a equal role, then trachea will remain in this same side, in the midline, in this midline. So if the pulling effect of the trachea by absorption collapse, that is bronchogenic carcinoma, overcomes the pulling effect of the trachea, again I will repeat. So if the pulling effect of the trachea by absorption collapse, that is bronchogenic carcinoma, overcomes the pushing effect of the trachea by compression collapse, that is pleural effusion, the trachea remains on the same side of effusion. So pulling effect is more because of the bronchogenic carcinoma. Remember, a pleural effusion commonly shifts the trachea to the opposite side. So this was your query. The examiner asked there is a fusion and you are getting same side trachea. Now what will say? Bronchogenic endobronchial growth. Then bronchus is not patent, negative intrapleural pressure, trachea will shift to the same side. So simple is that. And then what are the red flag signs in pleural effusion? What are the red flag signs in pleural effusion? So what are the red flag signs in pleural effusion? What are the red flag signs? Trachea shifted to the side of effusion. If trachea is shifted towards the side of effusion, trachea shift to effusion, side of effusion. Rapid and recurrent collection and development of empyema thoracis. These are the red flag sign. Red flag sign is rapid recurrent collection, development of empyema thoracis, trachea shift to the same side. You just do one thing, you take a stick pad, write these words and stick it in the wall so that you can remember. This is very important. The red flag signs in pleural effusion: trachea is shift to the side of effusion, then development of empyema thoracis, then rapid and recurrent collection. These are the red flags. And rapid recurrent collection is dangerous. Developing the empyema thoracis is dangerous, and tracheal shifting to the side of effusion is dangerous. So these are the red flag signs in pleural effusion. Then pleural effusion present but trachea remains in the midline. What are the causes? There is a fusion but trachea in midline. What are the causes? Effusion but trachea in the midline. Then if there is a mild pleural effusion, only apical impulse is shifted to the opposite side. So if there is a mild effusion, the trachea will not shift. Mild effusion, trachea will not shift. Then malignant pleural effusion secondary to bronchogenic carcinoma. If there is a malignant effusion which is secondary to bronchogenic carcinoma, trachea will not shift. Trachea will not shift if there is malignant pleural effusion due to bronchogenic carcinoma. Then localized or encysted effusion, loculated or encysted effusion. Then both the apical impulse and trachea will not shift. Then bilateral pleural effusion, if the collection is equal more or less, bilateral effusion, trachea will not shift. Then pleural effusion with associated mesothelioma with pleural effusion, trachea will not shift. The coincidental association of pleural effusion with ipsilateral apical fibrosis. So in this case is the trachea will not shift. So I will highlight the important points. There is a mild effusion, how you can expect that trachea will shift? It will not shift in mild effusion. Also loculated or encysted effusions, trachea will not shift. Then if there is a bilateral effusion, trachea will not shift. And malignant bronchogenic carcinoma, malignant effusion because of bronchogenic, trachea will not shift. Besides this, mesothelioma, pleural effusion because of mesothelioma, trachea will not shift. And pleural effusion with ipsilateral apical fibrosis, trachea will not shift. Now the another question. Observation on inspection of the back in respiratory case. Back, what are the things you look in back in respiratory case? Inspection of back in respiratory case is always done in standing position if the condition of the patient permits, to avoid undue obliquity. Go to the back of the patient and look for. So what are the things in look for back? Kyphosis, look from the sides in profile. You will look for the kyphosis. You will look for the scoliosis, may be responsible for mediastinal shift. So you will look for the scoliosis. Then drooping of the shoulders signifies apical fibrosis or collapse or trapezius paralysis. So drooping will suggest collapse, fibrosis or trapezius paralysis. Then winging of the scapula indicates the injury to long thoracic nerve palsy or spinal deformity. Prominent middle border of the scapula is seen. So winging of the scapula, prominent middle border of the scapula will be seen. Then whether the inferior angle of the scapula on both sides are at the same level or not. Inferior angle of the scapula. Then in the back you will also see the interscapular area, that spinoscapular distance, comparison between the two sides of the chest. Interscapular distance. Then intercostal suction you will see on the back, intercostal suction. Then gibbous, you will look for the gibbous in the back. Gibbous is the acute angulation in the spine due to collapsed vertebra. Acute angulation in the spine due to collapsed vertebra, which is commonly developing from Carey spine and sometimes as a result of metastasis or trauma. So in Carey spine, in metastasis or trauma, you will get gibbous. It is the acute angulation in the spine. Acute angulation in the spine due to collapsed vertebra, you will get the gibbous. That ankylosing spondylitis, there will be stiff and immobile spine, may produce restrictive lung disease. So if there is ankylosing spondylitis, there will be stiff and immobile spine. Stiff and immobile spine in ankylosing spondylitis. Then loss of normal thoracic kyphosis is known as straight back. Straight back, there is loss of thoracic kyphosis will be lost in straight back. Then crowding of the ribs both in front as well as the back, you will see the crowding of the ribs. Then skin condition, you will see whether any scar, sinus, herpes zoster, local edema, venous prominence, arterial pulsation is Sussman sign. Then pigmentation, any deformity after thoracic operation, that is thoracoplasty. These things you have to note on the skin. So I repeat, skin mein you have to see scar, sinus, skin mein scar, sinus, herpes zoster, edema, venous prominence, arterial pulsation, that is Sussman sign. Any pigmentation, any deformity after thoracic operation, that is thoracoplasty. Then you will look for the movement in the back, whether both the sides are moving simultaneously and symmetrically or not. Simultaneous and symmetric movement is there or not. So this was the inspection of the back in respiratory tract. Now we'll discuss importance of past history in pleural effusion. What is the importance of past history in pleural effusion? You will say any history of fever, cough, chest pain, heaviness in the chest. You should note it down in the past history. Any history of tuberculosis in the past or contact history. Any history of asbestosis history, you can guess is by if patient is doing mining, textile worker, pipe filters, ship builder. So the asbestos history, mining, textile, pipe filters, ship builders. So you have to take the past occupational history important. Then any history of diabetes, smoking history for malignant effusions, smoking history. Then skin rash, joint pain, swelling, neck swelling, lymphadenopathy. Next, swelling for lymphadenopathy in the past. Then for collagen vascular disease, you will ask for rash and joint pain. Past history of rash, joint pain for collagen vascular diseases. Then past history of hemoptysis, past history of tuberculosis, bronchogenic carcinoma, then past history of trauma to the chest, then any similar illness significant in the past or in the family you will ask. So this is the past history. Now what are the differential diagnoses of your case? You get a patient with fever, with heaviness in the chest, with dry cough. What are the differential? First differential you will keep is pneumonic consolidation. Pneumonic consolidation, there will be acute onset of the high fever with the rusty sputum and chest pain. Acute onset of fever with the rusty sputum with chest pain. Then pulse to respiration ratio normal is 4:1. There will be tachypnea and it will change from 4:1 to 2:1 or 3:1 in pneumonic consolidation because of tachypnea. This is pulse to respirate. This is pulse to respiratory ratio. As the tachypnea proceeds, this ratio reduced to 2:1. Then there will be trachea and apex speed will be in normal. Trachea and apex speed will be normal. Then